A seismic shift is happening right now when it comes to how consumers think about credit cards. That's according to Judd Linville, the CEO of Citi Cards, who joins me now on set. So Judd, what is this shift? Explain.
Thanks, Scott. It's good to be here. The shift, if you think about it, as the largest credit card issuer, we have a window into all those transactions. And if you think about the world today that's becoming digital by default, the pace of change is accelerating at a speed you can't believe. So how payments are done and how mobile providers are going to play, I think is going to be fascinating.
And that shift is largely moving to digital platforms, right? We have Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, Android Pay. What is your take on all these platforms?
You got a whole mix. So frankly, credit cards still are heavy in use. If you think about online purchasing, it represents probably 25% of all purchase, but e-commerce is the fastest growing. The other is how you buy or how you check out. So whether it's a Citi Pay on MasterPass or a Visa checkout, because the networks will build wallets, or whether it's an Apple Pay or Samsung, there's a variety of choices. The thing that we found in our consumer research was that people, there's a few hurdles. There's a hurdle of trust and a hurdle of complexity.
So you think the card perhaps still has a role going forward in terms of, tapping your card against a processor instead of holding up a smartphone?
So I've been in this business several decades. I keep wondering when, in fact, cards are going to disappear. Cards are easy. Whether it's a swipe is easy, whether, in fact, it's a tap and pay that's easy. I think you're going to see integration of all those over time. And in some respects, that's happened on the phone with a token. The next move you're going to see is the tokenization of payments.
And I imagine you're trying to lure millennials as you look to the future. Are you finding that millennials are a little bit afraid of credit cards, just given how much student loan debt that they have? They may not want to go and start using credit cards, and that temptation to get into credit card debt builds up.
So first, I'm always thinking about, how do you skate to where the puck's going to be? And
right.
How do we build relationships with young people who begin to have disposable income? I also don't think there's anything unique about this cohort and millennials as it relates to credit cards. I would say that anybody who's just getting a job, just getting out of school, has student debt, tends to be cautious about how they'll use a card, and cautious because they don't want to go into debt. And if you look at some of the Fed data, it says that the millennial generation has done a good job not building up debt, but they are using credit cards.
Well, because it's funny, because we hear, millennials, they're sort of studied like they were, a different generation than any other generation. But you think they're just like any other young people over the course of decades?
I think there's always going to be a couple of broad kind of cultural elements. I think there's also going to be some things based on what's going on in the economy at large. With this group, with the millennials, I will tell you that they are driving a tidal wave surge in terms of digital applications. So if you look at who's using some of these phones, who's adapting to different kinds of P2P, disproportionately it is that age cohort. And disproportionately it is using a set of digital or mobile payment tools.
Before we let you go, we have to talk about that EMV card transition, which a lot of consumers are complaining about because it takes a lot more time to dip your card into that processor than simply swiping it, which is what we were all used to.
Yeah, so you said transition as if it was past tense. To me, we're in the middle of a transition. And in a network business, whenever you change standards, it means that people have to do something different. Merchants had to set up new terminals. Consumers had to get used to dipping as opposed to swiping. I think, frankly, from a counterfeit fraud standpoint, it's a wonderful device. I think getting used to the fact that it's a dip, what's happening is actually all that processing that's happening. Much of it happened when you did a swipe, but it just went into the background. And it received in the background, you put your card in your wallet and you talk to the Trader Joe's person about how your day was.
Right. So would you call this sort of transition that we're in a success or a failure, or too early to tell?
I'd say we're in the middle of it, and I'd say the next leapfrog is tokenization. I think that's what you're going to see in terms of whether tap and pay or whether it's using biometrics. At the point of sale, that's the next move. In e-commerce, it clearly is going to be tokenization so that you can have a one fingerprint checkout instead of 144 characters that you have to type in.
All right, and just quickly, Citi Cards, you're linked up with Visa. Of course, Costco, one of the biggest retailers, sort of kicked out American Express. They're now with Visa. What's your take on that real quick?
So we issue on both MasterCard and Visa. Visa won the association, the network, and we won the issuing. It's a massive, massive transition. It was actually the single biggest conversion in a single day without an interim service agreement. Got a great partnership with Visa and Costco, and I'll tell you what we've seen in the early days. It was June 17th, and the number of new applications we've seen and the spend is absolutely astounding.
All right, Judd Linville, CEO of Citi Cards. Fascinating stuff. Thanks for coming by.
Thank you, Scott.
I'm Scott Gam, and you're watching The Street.